creative writing books and classes, the word scene gets tossed around a lot. But what exactly is a scene, and how can you best use it to advance the plot of your novel? In this video, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to start by defining what a scene is, and then I'm going to give you some examples of both what a scene is and also what it is not, and I'm going to end by talking about how to choose which scenes to include in your novel in order to best choose the ones that advance the plot of your story and also your major theme. And I'm very excited to get into this, so let's just jump right in. So let's start with the definition of a scene. A scene is an event in your story that moves the plot and your major theme forward. It's not just an event like my main character walks to his car and closes the door and drives to work. It is an event that moves the story forward and changes something either about the stakes, the plot, or the character, fundamentally, that puts them in a different place at the end of the scene than they were at the beginning of the scene. And the place that they are at the end of the scene is closer to where they need to be to achieve their main goal of the story. For example, let's say you're writing a book about a teenage girl who enters a fight to the death competition and starts a rebellion in her totalitarian society that ends up crumbling the autocracy and allowing the rebels to take over their society. This story spans a large amount of time. If you wrote every single little thing that the character did from the very first page of that story to the very end of that story, you would have a very, very, very long book. It would also be dreadfully boring to read. If your story started with the character waking up in the morning, brushing their teeth, putting on their clothes, doing their exercise routine, eating breakfast, walking to say hi to their family members, the entire word-by-word conversation with their family member, then going and doing their other things that they do in the morning, and you go in this much detail for every single day of your story, your readers will go to sleep and it will be incredibly boring and it will be very confusing to follow as you're reading it because it's unclear exactly what the story is about. As the author, it is your job to figure out what your story is about. So what the major conflict is of your story, what your character wants, what is standing in their way, and what are they going to do to get it. And it's also up to you to figure out what the major thematic element of your story is. So what is the invisible story you are telling throughout your story that your readers are going to connect to on an emotional level as they are devouring your content. If you want to learn more about what a major theme is and how to employ theme in a story, I've made a couple of videos on it and also had a great interview with the author of my favorite book on theme, which I will put in the cards and also the description of this video. I like to think of every scene in a novel as having the same major plot arc as your book as a whole. So every single scene has a character who wants something that's standing in their way, and some sort of change that occurs either in their circumstances or in them individually. Every single scene has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and every single scene has a character who wants something and something standing in their way, and this rising tension and conflict as they try to achieve what they want, and the thing that's standing in their way fights right back at them. In my head, it looks something like this. This is pulled from a book that I really love on theme and storytelling structure, which is called Dynamic Story Creation, which I have talked a lot about on this channel, just because I've found this book so helpful in learning how to write. This definition might still sound a little bit vague, so now I'm going to give you some examples of scenes that I think are very effective to help try to illustrate what I see a scene as being and to hopefully convey that to you. One example of a scene that I am just making up now in my head is, let's say that you're writing a book about a relationship. It's a romantic comedy, and the book starts with a girl who's in an unhappy relationship, and she's just found out that her boyfriend cheated on her, and she gets really angry and she dumps her boyfriend, and then the rest of the book is about her going and pursuing a relationship with another really nice person, and then they end up together at the end of the book. At the beginning of the book, she needs to have this confrontation with her ex-boyfriend that he did cheat on her, and she has to go and find out if it's true and break up with him. So an example of a scene would be if this main character has evidence of the cheating. She brings the evidence to her boyfriend's place of work, and she confronts him with the evidence in the middle of the workplace, absolutely livid with anger. What she wants in this scene is to find out whether or not her boyfriend is actually cheating on her. What's standing in her way is the fact that she is confronting him in a public place, and also the fact that he doesn't really want to be honest and admit to having cheated because because he's pretty slimy and he also doesn't want to completely ruin the relationship. This scene follows a pretty distinctive arc. At the beginning, she goes into the place of work. In the middle, she and the boyfriend have a conversation about the cheating, and at the end, she finds out that he really was cheating and she gets really angry and leaves. That is a very clear beginning, middle, and end, and it also follows an arc because it has a rising action section. The main character is also fundamentally different at the beginning than they are at the end of this scene. At the beginning of the scene, she might have thought that she was in a relationship with a boy who loved her, and at the end of the scene, they are broken up and she's absolutely crushed. This scene moves your plot forward because her being absolutely crushed and breaking up with this guy is necessary for her to be open to be in a new relationship with this new guy who is really nice to her, and when they, have all of their romance over the course of the other part of the book. That's a pretty cut and dry example of a scene. An example of something that would not be a scene is her walking to her car with the evidence ready to drive to the boyfriend's place of work to confront him about the evidence of his cheating. That is a very small event, but there's no conflict there, there's no motivation, there's no antagonist, there's no driving force. I mean, I guess you could argue that she is closer to where she needs to be at the end of the book, because at the end of the driving sequence, she's closer in proximity to where the boyfriend is working, so she's more easily able to confront it, but that transportation sequence doesn't move the theme, and it also doesn't move your plot. Other examples of things that aren't scenes are your character brushing their teeth in the morning, or your character having a conversation with a friend informing them of the breakup if nothing actually changes. If they are still angry at the beginning about their breakup and they end the scene still angry about their breakup, you don't need to have a big long scene about them telling the friend something that the reader has already seen happen. It is your job as the author to decide which scenes actually bring your characters closer to achieving their goals, and which scenes are either redundant because they repeat old information or just rehash old character growth that's already happened in your novel, or if they are better off as narrative summary, where the information conveyed in them is necessary to the story, but it is not so necessary that we need to spend a lot of time on it. So how do you choose which scenes to include in your novel? I don't remember where I read or learned this, but it really stuck with me. I heard once that it is your job as the author to take your reader by the hand and pull them through your story as fast as humanly possible. You don't want to bore them. You don't want to give them the same information packaged in 12 different ways. You need to figure out how to streamline your plot so that it is just down to its bare bones, and every single step is necessary, otherwise your story crumbles. You want your stories to be built like a Jenga tower so that if one piece is removed, your story no longer makes sense. So I would start by plotting out your story from a bird's eye view. Try to figure out what your character wants, what is standing in their way, and what your major thematic element is. And then, using post-it notes or index cards, write down all of the things that need to happen in order to get your character to the point of their ultimate conflict in the story, to that climax point of the story, and just start writing those major plot elements. Whenever I start writing my scenes, at the top of the chapter, I always write what my character motivation is and what is standing in their way, so that when I'm writing, I already have an idea of how my character is going to change from the beginning of that chapter to the end of that chapter, so that helps keep that clear in my head as I'm working. Also, my last note on scenes is that a scene does not necessarily equal a chapter, and that you can have multiple scenes in the same chapter. Think of your scenes as events of change, not just events, because that will help frame it in your mind that you want to be growing your characters and moving them throughout the story, not just showing them in their day-to-day routine, because that's not very exciting to read as a reader. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you did, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. My name is Claire Fraise, and I am an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel sharing the actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. I'm the author of young adult supernatural thriller They Stay, as well as They Whisper, the sequel to that book, and I have the third book in my series coming out in January. I hope you all have a fantastic week and an exciting ramp up to NaNoWriMo starting in a couple of weeks. As always, happy writing.